Today's video is a little bit unique. I want to talk a lot about being an empath. And I never really understood that I was an empath, to be honest with you, until quite later in my career, right? When I first became an entrepreneur, if you guys don't know, I own a real estate investment firm where we flipped over 250 houses in the last 6 years. And it wasn't until I really started going to people's houses and I started in this like sales process, right? Which I don't know if you guys found this video because of spirituality, this might not quite relate to you, but, or it might, I digress. I started noticing that I can tell relatively quickly in a conversation if the sellers liked me, if they were engaged with what we were talking about, and if they were likely to sell their home to me within that conversation. It was like magic, I felt like. I could just tell. I was in tune with them through their body language, through their word association, the way they mirrored me, the way that they didn't mirror me. Whatever was happening in the conversation, I could just tell. And I didn't really understand why. I didn't even know that that is like the definition of being empathic. And if you feel that in your life, you kind of understand what I'm saying. You can literally feel people around you, especially if you're in a crowded room. It can feel incredibly overwhelming because you could be watching a conversation across the room and you'd be like, that guy doesn't like her, or that she's not really into that conversation. And you could just feel their energy. It could be very overwhelming, and I totally understand that and I could relate to that. I too hate large rooms. But oftentimes we think of it as a curse, and I want to share with you guys that it's actually a superpower. We can reframe the way that we view, I guess, the way that we became empaths. And the only way to really kind of understand it and have the self-awareness that you are an empath and what to do with that information is to kind of explain how I became one. Growing up, my father was an alcoholic. My mom and I believe he was never really diagnosed as a narcissist, but probably was a narcissist. The alcoholism, though, was really hard for our family. It created a very chaotic environment where we didn't really know what version of dad we were going to get. And for me, as like a protector of my mom, I had to quickly assess the way my dad was feeling every single day, almost every hour by hour, minute by minute. I had to be able to know intuitively what he was feeling and what his reactions were going to be every moment of the day. It was very stressful on just 12-year-old Kit, right? I tell this story all the time because it's just so true that I could be sitting in my room with my door closed, and based on the way my dad would open the door, close the door, and walk across the kitchen to my room, I could tell exactly the mood he was in before I even looked at him. The way he closed the door, the way he maybe didn't close the door, the cadence at which he walked in, the breaths that he was taking, I can hear it through the door. Like, I had to be able to know, do I need to be prepared for a fight right now? Or do I need to be prepared to entertain him for a while? Maybe he has been drinking, I don't want him to take it out of my mom. I mean, there was so much that I had to assess momentarily, right then and there, in order to survive. And so becoming an empath was a mechanism that I had to do to survive. When I carried that into adulthood, it could be really overwhelming, right? When you're in a large crowded room, or maybe it's Christmas and you're around a bunch of family members, you can almost just feel everybody's energy the minute you walk in. And I'm a person that I'm extroverted, right? I like to talk to everybody. I like to get to know everybody. That's just who I am. But at the end of the night, it's very exhausting. When I get home, I'm very tired because all night long, I'm assessing everybody's emotions. I'm feeling what they're feeling. And you might even notice this in your life. People tend to tell you their problems. That's one of the key indicators that you are an empath and that you're in tune with people. People can feel that you're engaged with them even if they're not an empath, because your energy, your vibrations are so strong that it almost makes them connect with you on a level that some of them don't even recognize that they're connecting with you. It's subconscious. And then they begin to tell you their problems. It happens to me all the time. I'm sure it happens to you. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be watching this video. But it could be a superpower. And I'm going to share with you how I turned it into a superpower. When I am in my sales process, a lot of body language and word associations that I didn't really know could be labeled, I started labeling, right? the way people would lean into a conversation, told me if they were engaged with what I was saying, the way that they mirrored my body language, all these key indicators. There's a great book called The Ellipsis Manual. Please go read it. It's written by a CIA interrogator who would interrogate terrorists during, like, right after 9/11, right? And he wrote this whole manual about body language, and I was fascinated with it. Much like probably a lot of you are fascinated with human behavior. As empaths, we like to study people. It's our nature. And so I invite you to read the book. It's fascinating. It'll help you in everyday life. I would implement my abilities to read people in normal conversations at work. And it gives you an edge. And reframing it as a superpower is really powerful, because when you think of it as a hindrance, or you think of it as, this is an overwhelming negative thing in my life that I can just feel, I just want to lock myself in the house, I never want to leave, I never want to engage with anybody because it's just too overwhelming. I understand that, I recognize that. But once you reframe it, you flip it on its head and you realize this power helps me reach people. It helps me connect with people on a deeper, more meaningful level, so that I can build like and trust with people faster. Because that's what it does. Being an empath allows you to build rapport with people much faster than if you don't. Like when I coach people in my coaching program for real estate, overwhelmingly, the people that are successful in the coaching program are also empaths, because they can navigate a conversation and feel whether they have the person's attention, whether they feel they have the person's like and trust. It's obvious to them. And I hate to talk about people that have no trauma, because obviously if you have no trauma, God bless you. But people that don't have trauma, right, that aren't in tune with themselves, that aren't in tune with others around them, they struggle. They struggle in this process. They struggle connecting with other people, because a lot of them don't even recognize normal behaviors that you and I recognize naturally. It's so funny trying to teach somebody who's not an empath how to read body language. It's almost difficult. It doesn't click in their head. Where it's natural. You can look at somebody and completely dissect them piece by piece, their facial expressions, their shoulders, their arms, their legs. Are they into it? Are they not into it? Are they rolling their eyes? Are they not rolling their eyes? Are they even listening to what you're saying? It's a superpower. And I invite you to think of it that way and train it. When you're out in public, watch people, watch their conversations, and dissect the way that they are interacting with each other, because it'll help you hone it as you practice. I used to do this fun, I didn't even mean to talk about this, but I feel called to just share this with you. My wife and I used to play this game when we were in public, that we would watch a couple and we would make up their lives, right? That person's a doctor, they work in surgery, that's their new girlfriend, they're not married yet, they don't have any kids, this is what they're probably talking about. And we would play this game. And sometimes we try and eavesdrop and be like, are we right? What's hilarious is you're probably closer than you think when you're guessing those things, because you can feel it. You're intuitive about it. That's powerful. I would argue empaths rule the world. Empaths are actually able to conquer themselves because they understand human nature on a deeper, more meaningful level. A lot of it is born out of tragedy, and it sucks. It sucks. I'm not going to sit here and say that it was great. But taking such a huge, heavy negative and turning it into a positive for your life is so important in living a full self-healing journey life. I know that's a mouthful, but in order to become your full version of yourself, an asset rather than a liability to your family, it's acknowledging these things, these parts of your life, and really honing them in and becoming intuitive about it. So I want to leave you with this, okay? Number one, reframing into a superpower, massively important. Number two, setting boundaries for yourself, okay? So important to you. If you're like me, you probably get overwhelmed and overstimulated incredibly easily, because you feel everything, and then all of a sudden if it's loud on top of that, there's so much stimulus going on, and it's hard for our brains to categorize it in our heads. It's so we become overwhelmed and we have to excuse ourselves from the situations. Create these boundaries for yourselves. The minute you start feeling yourself getting overwhelmed, instead of reacting and having a negative reaction to maybe a loved one or your spouse, just excuse yourself and communicate with your significant other. Hey, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. I'm just gonna go step outside real quick and get away from some of this situation so that I can then come back and gather myself. We love being outside. There's something about being in nature as an empath and just being alone in the woods or by the beach, wherever you can get some space to really listen to yourself so that you can also heal some of that tragedy in your life. Massively important when it comes to setting boundaries. So create these things in your life, and I promise you, you will have superpowers at your disposal, and it will be so exciting the next time you're in a situation where you have to deploy it, right? Whether you are in sales or some version of sales, or you just want to be in a loving, healthy relationship with your spouse, doesn't matter. These superpowers can help you in your life. Hopefully you got some value from this, guys. If you did, please be sure to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for being here. Be well.